Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Zhang from the class of 2019, and I'm the first marshal on the 2019 class committee. It's so awesome to see everyone here. Also, as part of the fifth reunion program committee chairs for my class, and so we are so excited to welcome you to the ninth Real World for Recent Grads event and the third and final for 2025. And so, based on some of the beloved senior spring event series held over the past several years, the Real World for Recent Grads will bring together recent college graduates across all the 10 classes to learn from each other and discuss relevant real world topics. And love seeing that we have such a mix of years already, seeing from folks' name over their Zoom names. And so the virtual event series are hosted by class leaders in partnership with HAA, the Harvard Alumni Association. And today we are discussing caregiving and legacy planning. And so we hope that these are fun, informal, casual, for us, by us events. Hope that these can also be conversational and not just lecture based. So if you're able to, would love to see your faces, to have your cameras on. We'd also love participation in the chat during any remarks. And so feel free to also unmute, share anything during discussion portion. You can utilize the chat, raise your hands, etc. And then, quick note, as you saw, we're recording these sessions to share by email with recent grads after and to post on alumni.harvard.edu, where you can find the other real world event series. So we kick off, I'll provide just a bit of background information before I hand it to our first panelist. So the Harvard Alumni Association is the official association of all alumni of Harvard University. The HAA maintains and enhances a highly engaged, vibrant community of alumni and friends worldwide. The College Alumni Program's Office of the HAA serves more than 100,000 Harvard and Radcliffe College alumni, and the HAA Recent Graduate Engagement Committee, made up of class committee leadership across the classes, facilitates the meaningful engagement of Harvard College recent graduates with the Harvard alumni community. And so now let's go ahead and we're going to kick it off to our speakers. First up is Amy Liu, class of 23, who's going to speak about her background in trust in estate planning, including the types of critical estate planning documents that young adults should prepare. So thank you, Amy. It is over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. As Catherine very kindly introduced, I was class of 23. I concentrated in classics and minored in psychology. And now I work in private wealth management in a trust and estate planning role. Goes without saying that it's kind of a weird jump to make, but I think that's pretty common in our alma mater's past. And something that I really love about what I do is while in private wealth management, of course, we're working with high net worth people, so their balance sheets might require more complex solutions. Estate planning conversations are kind of the great equalizer. Everybody has to think about these things at some point, and it's better to be prepared than not, which kind of takes me right into this first quote. Before I jump in, feel free to unmute if you just want to unmute, but does anybody know who said this? I can't see the chat right now, so if somebody's saying it, feel free to shout it out, John or Catherine.
Not
Do we
seeing
have
any
any
guesses.
takers? No.
So
Oh
we'd
my
love to hear.
gosh, wow. This is great. Okay, yes. Well, in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. That is a quote by Mr. Benjamin Franklin, whose face goes on my favorite parts of my paychecks. All right. Yes, so two things that are guaranteed for everyone, death and taxes. While it was meant to be a humorous dig, it is true. And this is how I like to start off estate planning conversations. Because it is a touchy subject. Nobody really likes to think about what's going to happen when they have left this mortal plane, but it's a very necessary one, and it's much better to be prepared than not, as I said earlier. Can people raise their hands in this room, John and Catherine? Yes? Raise of hands, who here owns a car? Who drives? Oof, okay, we've got some reliance on public transit. I kind of dig it. I also rely on public transit. I don't have a car. But okay, of the people raising their hands who own a car, could you please keep your hand in the air if you do not have auto insurance? That's if you do not have auto insurance on your car. Interesting. Okay, as we have seen, everybody is driving an insured vehicle. That's great to hear. I like to kind of start this conversation here because the chances of you getting in a car crash are much less likely than the 100% chance that you are going to die one day. So it is very important to think about this. If you don't feel comfortable driving in an uninsured car, how do you feel comfortable right now operating in the world when we call it the proverbial bus that might hit you if you're crossing the street and not looking both ways, but you never know what's going to happen, and it's always better to have a plan in place. So when it comes to the very basics of estate planning, you want to think about how all of your property, everything that is titled under your name, is going to be disposed of or transferred upon your death. Who's going to be responsible for handling that? So all of your property, both tangible and intangible real estate, that's all called your estate once you've passed. There is an estate administrator who's going to be required to, based off the position, handle your estate so that way it's processed, everything is titled or passed on or sold, and it can be quite a heavy lift. So you want to make sure you're not dumping that on somebody, or if you haven't named somebody who you trust to be your estate administrator, it's going to go to the state. There's going to be one named, and that requires a fee. So just something to think about, especially if it's never come up before. Not many of us, I hope, under death frequently. So you'd be surprised to hear how much of an administrative and kind of meticulous process it can be. And so that brings me to my final bullet point on the left here, probate. So probate court processes any property that has not automatically transferred upon your death. So things that automatically transfer include retirement accounts if you've named a beneficiary, if you have any financial accounts that are payable on death, or any brokerage accounts that are transfer upon death. Those are common titling functions that can bypass probate. All of your property that isn't, even if it is dictated by your will, so anything testamentary, has to go through probate to be formally retitled. And I like to compare probate to the DMV. It is somewhat unavoidable, but you want to spend as little time there as possible, because probate can be incredibly laborious and very delayed. When it comes to estate handling, your estate administrator, depending on the complexity of your estate, may be able to wrap up the process in 6 months, but we've seen cases that can go well over a year, sometimes well over multiple years. So you want to try and make it as easy as possible. So that way, again, you're not saddling somebody with the unfortunate responsibility of handling your estate. And then on the taxes piece, I'm not going to impose any views on taxes on everybody. I think everybody's free to have their own views, but just so you know, upon transfer of death, anything that goes over your unified lifetime credit, which is something I can talk about, it's a little bit in the weeds during Q&A, anything that is being passed on is subject to transfer tax. And so you want to be planning your estate so that way you can preserve as much of your wealth as possible for the next generation or to your loved one if you're married. And you can also distribute your assets free of transfer taxes if you would like to give charitably. So those are certain estate planning tactics or very basic techniques that we talk about with our clients. John, if you want my next slide. Great. I've separated this into the land of the living and the land of the dead. So please take the top portion as your kind of more immediate. These are things that you can do right now that will still remain in effect during your life and have to do with your care during your life. But these are kind of a handy list of basic estate planning documents that we recommend all of our clients to have in place. And these are things that are very accessible. Each of you could probably get one of these in place by the end of next week. So starting with the healthcare proxy, this appoints a healthcare agent. This is just somebody who you would trust to make your healthcare decisions in the case that you are incapacitated, perhaps you're in a coma, or you're currently undergoing such severe condition that you can't make your own healthcare decisions. So of course, that's somebody that you want to trust, but it's up to you who you'd like to appoint there. Something that we recommend kind of go hand in hand with the healthcare proxy is a living will, sometimes called an advanced medical directive. This just kind of guides whoever you've named your agent and perhaps also your loved ones if they want to be part of the discussion, but eventually or ultimately the agent is the one who's making the decision. What you would want to be done should you be put in extreme healthcare decision. The very kind of rough example that we use is, after a certain period of time or after a certain prognosis, whether you decide to continue seeking treatment, because healthcare can be quite expensive, and sometimes it's a very difficult decision, but you want to make sure whoever you've named your agent is prepared to make the choice on your behalf and isn't kind of floundering on their own. Next, you have your power of attorney. This can be durable or non-durable. That just means whether the power of attorney remains in place if you've been incapacitated. And this also appoints an agent, but only over your financial matters. There are actually multiple versions of the power of attorney, but that's kind of our basic boilerplate one. This gives somebody the power to act on your behalf over all your financial accounts. So say you have a durable power of attorney in place. I just went into a coma and all of my accounts are currently inaccessible by anyone except for me or anybody who has a durable power of attorney. On the right there, in that rightmost column, I've put important times when you might want to consider revisiting these documents if you don't already have if you have them in place already, but there's certain life events that come up. So for example, when you get married, a lot of people name their spouse as their healthcare agent, and also leave behind commentary in their living will specifically pertaining to their spouse. When you've had children as well, if you're aging, people will tend to, at a certain point, or if your spouse is no longer with you, name their child as their agent instead. Same goes for a power of attorney. So if you are getting married, a lot of people just put in a durable power of attorney, so that way they don't have to individually retitle all of their accounts for their spouse. Or if they're expecting a decline in their health, also naming a power of attorney who can be trusted to administer their financial accounts while they're still living. And then finally, in the land of the next life, so to speak. So once you have left this mortal plane, these kind of go back to the titling changes that I mentioned earlier. So things that will automatically pass outside of probate upon your death include beneficiary designations on your retirement accounts. That's the most common beneficiary designation. There are other types of accounts that you can designate beneficiaries for. And then payable on death or transfer on death. Those are kind of, your run-of-the-mill deposit or brokerage accounts. A quick update that you can make on all of those to say what happens in the event that you pass away. And then finally, your last will and testament. This is kind of the first estate planning document that people come to, and it actually, paradoxically, is supposed to be the last thing, because this is where it's kind of a catch-all. Everything that you didn't explicitly give your power of attorney over, power over during your life, that you didn't already title ahead of time, is going to kind of get wrapped up in your last will and testament and get disposed of upon your death, based off of your executor. Your last will and testament is also what names your guardians. So if you have children, definitely important to revisit your will, so that way you can name a guardian for your children. And that concludes my section. I'm going to pass it off now to somebody with a lot more experience in the kind of elbow deep work that is estate planning.
Amy, thank you so much. That was awesome to see. I screenshotted that slide. I was like, I need to know all of these things. So let's pass it next up to Jessica Gebhard, who's class of 20, who will speak more about established living trust documents, including what's involved in the process and why you would want to prepare these. So Jess, over to you.
Thank you. And I should say at the beginning of this that I just really appreciate this series being first gen, low income, first person in my family to do a lot of things. I've really gotten a lot of value out of this and out of connections with other alums. So thank you for all the hard work putting this together. Okay, so let's get into my section. So definitely we're kind of like a self-selecting crowd on this webinar, but just in case you're not convinced, if you like need to worry about this stuff, it is super blunt, but it's the truth. You're going to die sooner or later. So it's, as Amy was saying, it's best to have a plan. And I really like to frame it as like an act of service where you're doing a favor to your loved ones. You're making it much, much easier for them. Imagine the people closest to you who love you the most. If you are dead, then they don't have to deal with one more hard thing when they're already sad that you're dead. So I think you should worry about this stuff. You should put together these documents that were in that slide. Hopefully everyone screenshotted it because that was a great list. And if you have the resources to talk to an attorney, I would recommend that. There are websites that let you prepare some of these documents, and I'm sure those work for some situations, but preparing these kinds of documents is not one size fits all. Everyone has a different situation and circumstance. And so talking it through with a person is perhaps the better way to go if you have the resources to do that. And I think you especially should worry about this stuff if you have a complex situation. So if you own a business, if you have perhaps strained family relationships, if there's anything complicated in your life that you really want a plan in place to make things easier, then I would recommend going forward with all of this. So what exactly do you have to do if you want to go about, putting together these documents to set up your estate or just plan things? So first, like before kind of making an appointment anywhere or like paying money to a website, you should probably like journal or think about what's most important to you and what you actually want to have happen after you die. If you have younger siblings, if you have kids, think about what you want to give to them, what you want to give with charitable contributions or anything else that might be in line with your values. And then, like I said, you'd probably want to talk to an attorney in your state. In my case, when I made these documents, there was a really good questionnaire that I had to fill out and then a conversation just to like make sure that everything was kind of accounted for. So kind of doing some record keeping or bookkeeping ahead of time is probably a good idea. And then I would also recommend really having a conversation with at least one person that you trust who's not an attorney, because you do have to actually designate responsibilities to people. So someone that's close to you, if it's a spouse, if you're married, or a sibling, or someone that you can really trust with your things after you die is kind of needed. And then from this screenshot, I won't repeat these, but there are several documents that you should put together for various purposes. Those were covered pretty well. Okay, and then I'll just get into like very quick, like personal experience. I'm sure we all have our own relationship with death and losing people. I had two grandfathers who passed in very different ways. The first didn't have any documents made at all, never spoke about a plan, and actually had seven children. And each of the children, this was on my mom's side, like wanted different physical belongings, and it created a lot of disputes. So not ideal. And then my other grandfather did have a will and only had five children. So things were a little smoother, but really things could have been even better because a lot of details did have to be worked out by like my aunts and uncles when their father had just passed away. So let's see. I've kind of gone through my reasons, except things were unique for me. I'm unmarried, I'm single, I don't have kids. And in my particular state, most times, if I were to die, all of my assets would go to my mom, who I haven't talked to in many years. So I just didn't want that to happen. And I wanted to kind of name specifically where my assets would go if I were to die. That would just be more in line with what I would want to happen. So that was like important enough to me that I sat down and did this. But I think everyone should maybe think about what you want to have happen. And I think you'll probably come to the realization that it's like important to say like what happens after you die, or at least like give a plan to the people that will be handling it when you're gone. Okay, so what exactly does a trust do? Let's kind of zoom into this document out of all of the documents that you can set up. A trust is one that kind of does a little bit more than a will. So assets, you need to get a title and then actually transfer the title into the trust. So the asset belongs to the trust and then is just managed by you if you're the trustee while you're alive. And then you can appoint successor trustees who take your place if you die, and then the assets still belong to the trust, and then the successor trustee just handles things from there. And this way you avoid the DMV, the probate court, and it's quicker, smoother, more private. Fun fact is that when you die, your will gets filed with a court, so it becomes part of the public record, and so it's not private. But you should still have a will to kind of designate things if you don't have a title for property and you want to say like this really great like armchair goes to my nephew or something like that. You could put that in your will. Okay, so a trust. Oh, I should also say, going to Harvard, I really thought like trust fund kids were all rich people, and that's not the case either. So it's just trusts you should probably establish whenever you have assets over different attorneys will probably tell you different numbers, but it's kind of just a blend of if you have enough assets that you want to go through this process, it's worth the legal fees with an attorney, and your situation kind of just requires it. So I would recommend establishing a trust if you have the reasons to do so. But not everyone needs a trust. I would say most people would benefit from it if you can have one written. Okay, so I'm happy to answer any questions. Certainly 5 minutes is not enough time to talk about everything, but there are some other tidbits that I think like are important enough that go with this topic. So, oh, we did touch on the Advanced Medical Directive or Advanced Healthcare Directive, and I would say you could also give a copy of that to your hospital if you know that you're going to have planned surgery. That's kind of just like a thing that you can have in your back pocket at any time once you write it. But just in general, I would say having like some place where you can also direct like your successor trustee or your agent that you name in any of these documents to like a place where you could find the documents. Storing them in the cloud is probably a good idea, but I have a bank safety deposit box. And I also have like written on like a piece of paper, like my password manager login and the password to it. So that will make things easier to log into all the accounts that you need to log into. Um, and then definitely this was something that Amy talked about. You can avoid probate court if you name beneficiaries on all your bank accounts, all your brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, anything like that. Okay, well, that was everything for me. And yeah, let me know if anyone has any questions at all. Happy to help.
Thank you, Jess. Really appreciate it. Next up, we're going to go to Fernando Espino, class of 15, who's going to speak about caring for the health and finances of family from a distance and caring for pets. Fernando, over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. And honestly, I can't remember if I shared slides with John or not. So if there are no slides, please forgive me. So I'm going to try to remember this off the top of my head. But if there's something to take away from what I'm about to share, um, it's just that I think there are three big questions you should always be asking yourself when thinking about caring for pets or caring for family. I think the questions are applied the same way. Question number one is, what do they need? Question number two is, what type of support can you provide? And question number three is, who else is there to help you? So let me talk about kind of how each of these questions end up applying to kind of these situations, at least as it's played out for me. For context, I live in the Bay Area. My family is mostly based in the Midwest. We've been separated and kind of had this physical separation for several years now. And so the answers to these questions when we first started being together were substantially different than what they were maybe years into this situation. And that really came to change once my family, we had a medical situation, a health concern that happened to one of my parents. And so the answer to those questions suddenly became much different. And the real key to trying to address the situation, recognizing that physical distance was something you had to kind of work towards, was this very frank communication with your family members to say, okay, what is it that you need in this case? And the answer to that sometimes can just be, I just need someone to hear me, right? It's not actually anything about finances. It's not anything about any actual healthcare related questions or documentations. Maybe it's just the support that you can provide from afar. In some cases, though, and this also did pertain to me, the answers were some of the items that that Amy and Jessica already have alluded to, right? So when you start to think about some of these bigger picture questions as it relates to potential healthcare ramifications, worst case scenario planning, you want to make sure to have those conversations at these moments, right? And then think about, what is it of those things? What is it that I can provide? I thankfully now am in a very good financial position relative to where my family was. And so I know that financially I can actually support in a way that perhaps my younger brother, who's just graduated college, is not in a position to do so. On the flip side, he lives like an hour flights away from my parents. So there is a trade-off here that you can easily recognize to say, somebody can provide more of a physical support, whereas somebody else can provide more of a financial support. And I don't think either one means it's better or worse, right? The goal here is the support being provided to the folks that need it in the moment that they need it. And as long as that happens, then like we're getting the job done. And that actually leads into the third phase, which is who else can help you. When dealing with kind of the parental health concern that we dealt with, it really was my brother and I leaning together to say, okay, let's divvy up what is it that we each can support from afar, but let's also understand who is there locally. Do we have any family members that are willing to take on more responsibility to say, hey, can they drive my mother or my dad to the hospital to do their regular checkups or not? Or do we have to kind of figure out a different mobility situation? Are there, friends or family that can do the same thing? And if that's not the case, like what can we do to kind of bring that about in those situations? So that was just a little bit on the family side. On the pet side, which I do think that this still very nicely applies. I think it's very important to understand the type of pet you want and the type of pet and like who they are as an individual. What is it that they need from you? And that can change from pet to pet, and even within a certain type of pet, the different types of breeds, right? It's really critical to understand, is your pet one that really needs like constant attention, needs constant activity, or conversely, like couldn't care less that you're there half the time, right? Like that, those questions matter significantly to understand like what lifestyle do you have to adapt to make the best living situation for your pet. So in my case, I have a dog who's really active, and that to me recognizes that I need to make sure that I am more attuned to taking them out constantly, and when I do, trying to get him as much energetic exercise as possible. Versus if we had kind of a, like, let's say, cat, right? One that was a little bit more homebody, like that situation would be different. My dog is also one that was a rescue that's particularly attached, and has separation anxiety. So, to me, it actually worked out really well that my work allows me to bring him to work. So that, not that I chose my work necessarily for that reason, but it is certainly something that was a plus side. And I recognize that because I understood that my pet like really needed that type of engagement and wouldn't otherwise enjoy being separated 8 hours a day, 5 days a week from me. And then I think the other aspect to think about with this is similar to how we think about our family. It's our pets are going to die at some point soon too, right? Like that will happen, as sad as that can make us, right? So we have to think about the same considerations in terms of health, in terms of finance, in terms of planning for them in the same way that we would for any other family member. So that is incumbent on all of us, whether it's our first time having a pet, whether it's a pet that we've had after several other types of pets, understanding how much financial investment will they need, not just to keep them engaged and alive every day, but if healthcare concerns do arise, right? Is it worth investing in pet insurance? Is it worth do you understand and account for the fact that sudden medical expenses may come out of the blue and what those might be? And if not, maybe start doing that. I would advise doing that before you've even had the pet. But even if once you have, it doesn't hurt to start asking those questions and to plan accordingly. And the last thing I would say, it's similar to any other human, is raising a pet is always like a communal affair. So even if you're not married, even if you're not a partner, friends, family who you have around can always make this a much more kind of embracing experience for your pet. I say this especially when we consider that you're not always going to be there for your pet in that specific moment. That's not just for work, but when you think about going on vacation, literally leaving where you live, the more support network you have, other friends who can take care of the pet, if you have family members near you, like that support network is huge to ensure that they still get the proper care and support that they need. But that doesn't necessarily mean a limiting situation for you as you want to do any other items in your life. So in closing, I would say always think about the 3 big questions for yourself. What support does your family need? What support do your pet need? What type of support can you provide them in the moment? And who else is there to help you provide the support if it isn't something that you can provide in that moment? So happy to answer any other questions as they come up.
Thank you, Fernando. I'm written those three questions down to ask my partner who has a cat about it. So thank you for sharing that. That was really helpful. We are going to move to Francisco Cernata, class of 20, who's going to speak about his experience navigating the legal system to assist family members as well as balancing family care with work. So Francisco, over to you.
Hey everyone, Francisco graduated class of 2020. And to kind of give some context, I think actually a lot of what you mentioned before, Fernando, resonates with sort of my experience navigating the legal system and what has been my life post Harvard. Some establishing context that I think a few of the folks on the call may relate to is I was the first in my family to go to college, grew up sort of in a low income background. And I think for a long time, really from the moment you get into Harvard or the moment you kind of realize going to college is something that's on your path, is like, well, how can I help my family? Especially having grown up in, where I did and with my family, I just kind of knew how different and distinct it was going to be going to Harvard, if anything, it's like going to college. And that's always been an expectation that's like an amazing privilege and opportunity, but also such a weight that you kind of handle. And I think what's I'll probably mark as the biggest difference the moment you walk off of campus is like you kind of get that feeling of, well, now this is the time, right, where I can actually start contributing and addressing maybe some of those issues. And what I'll kind of mention is kind of what my experience has been as I've worked with my family to handle what are a couple of legal issues, but also a couple of issues that had to deal with just legal status and immigration status that specifically affected my situation. Well, I liked what you did there, Fernando, in terms of like a couple of like high level learnings. And so what I'll talk about are three things that I think are especially important and help me navigate what was the world of like figuring out how to best help my family after having kind of had this expectation for a long time and finally being front and center in a position that could help. And first and foremost is what you kind of mentioned there was like really getting real with your family as soon as you can in terms of what the scenarios and situations they've been facing. I kind of put that urgency thing because if your family is anything like mine, immigrant family, sometimes it'll take longer than just one conversation for these things to unravel. And when you kind of, I think, position those, or you're finally in the position of being an adult and you have a degree, maybe you'll get a little bit on that first conversation. But as I've navigated the legal process with my mother and with other folks in my family, it was just kind of all coming out to be what was sort of like, more and more kind of different truths and scenarios that we could deal with. And that was what I'll probably say was the biggest marker that put me in the best position possible to actually figure out the scope and know how I could best help my family. So having those conversations, I think as a college graduate and as someone who finally had a full-time role was especially important. And I think really kind of helped me understand and wrap my head around like, all right, what were these actual things that I'm helping my family with and what kind of skill sets, knowledge, network can I offer that can actually begin to understand how I can take a step-by-step process on how to solve those. So that's first and foremost is like having that frank conversation. But the second one, I think, is one that I learned through this process, which is really taking care of yourself first and foremost and putting yourself in the best position possible to be able to help those folks in your family. And the reason I say that is, as I mentioned, it's a lot of pressure the moment you leave college, and that pressure sometimes doesn't go away. And the kind of experience I felt, especially as I was kind of getting more information about, this is my mom's current legal status, and this is what we can do. These are maybe some barriers, and also just a variety of different legal issues that we had to solve with. It really felt like boiling the ocean. And I wasn't really quite sure how exactly I could do or make an impact now. I really wanted to, right? And I think that that's such a frustrating place to be in. But what I really came to learn, which may be something everyone has to learn in the process, is like how important it really was to establish myself first to ensure that I'm able to, I have a couple skills and I have a degree and I've had this experience, but I can't start to help my mother or start to help other folks in my family unless I feel really confident in the situation and feel really safe. And I also think that goes hand in hand with also understanding what are your boundaries, right? Because you can help your family and you can offer those services, but I think something I especially began to appreciate was, okay, well, where do you not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's as much as drawing a line, but how are you still able to build and invest in what is like exactly what you need and know you need? I think something that for a long time felt like a big thing was moving to a really expensive city and like getting my own apartment. That felt crazy at some point, right? When you kind of think of some of the pressure you may have to help your family. But what I did know was that not only would it give me such an amazing opportunity in my work, it also give me the safety that I've kind of really been looking for a long time. But in that mindset and sort of in that environment is really the best when I was able to make sure I had that healthy balance and separation. So I can't help but stress how important that was for me, especially as I was navigating what were like really hard conversations. I'm for me at least, like having my own home and like having a place where I knew gave me comfort and sort of reprieve during these tough times was super important to me and really helped me be the best contributor possible for my family. The last one really has to do with I think to what you also mentioned, Fernando, about like who is here to help and assist you. And I think something that's really cool about once you maybe enter the workforce is meeting folks, whether that's your boss or different peers, who maybe are a little older at times, as like a really key resource and network to help you throughout these processes. When I was handling a couple of issues with my mom's immigration status. Having a candid conversation with some folks at work who I trusted, who I felt like I can have those conversations with, um, it was awesome. They had told me, hey, I actually handled something really similar 10 years ago. And here's this person you can talk to as a personal friend. And the Harvard Network is amazing. That's an especially important one. But I also think that in the professional world, it was a really great way to tap into an additional network that I think was really helpful and maybe in a way that was a little bit more immediate when it came to connecting with someone who was maybe 10 or 15 years my senior, who would have a little bit of a more established network as well. So those are kind of the three, I think, important takeaways as I've kind of helped my mom navigate a couple of these things and some issues as well. But I certainly would not have been able to do that had I not had that frank conversation, had I not sort of taken care of my needs and made sure I was established and kind of gave myself that patience and then also just kind of consulted within some folks within my own professional network that I think help really put me in a position to be the best like son possible, but also person to contribute to some of my family's issues. So yeah, happy to answer any questions and thank you all.
Thank you so much for sharing, Francisco. And I love that you kind of mentioned not necessarily just it having to be balanced, but actually you were able to bring in that conversation about care into the workplace. I think that's a really like important takeaway too. So thank you for that. Last but not least, our final speaker is Leticia Tiani Bessa, who was class of 17, also MBA class of 23, who's going to speak about caring for younger siblings as an adult, including the legal guardianship process and leveraging healthcare benefits at work for dependents. So, Tina, over to you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces. And lovely, for at least the opportunity to get to see other folks on the call. My name is Leticia, and to start with context, fall of my senior year, my dad passed very suddenly. And so 6 months before commencement, and as the oldest child, very much found myself, I think, in the grieving process as the pseudo parent or like parent number two, as my siblings affectionately call me. And so I want to speak about the legal guardianship journey for my little brother, but also leveraging work benefits, etc., to help take care of my siblings because this has been a running story, if you will, since graduation, and definitely not where I thought I would be had you asked me, what post grad life would have looked like as a freshman. Okay. All right. So then to go over the legal guardianship process, funny enough, probate court has already come up tonight. So here's another reason you could find yourself in court. The process does vary state by state. And so in full circle are the must happen steps, and then the investigation is optional. So first and foremost, you'd have to go file in your probate court to try to become a legal guardian for a minor. And depending on the state, for example, California will probably have an investigation where someone might show up at your house just to see where you would be taking care of said dependent, what you can offer, and just make sure things are going well. My legal guardianship process with my little brother happened in Ohio, and there was no investigation. So we filed in probate court, and we're given an appointment to meet with a judge. So that was the hearing where my brother and I appeared, and after the hearing, he asked a couple of questions to all of us and granted guardianship of my little brother to me. For context, my mom still resides in Cameroon, so my brother had come to the US for high school. We obtained the guardianship letters, and I just recommend having a few of those because one, it's important for your own records, but two, there are different places that will ask you for the guardianship letter, so it doesn't hurt to have more than one. And so what happens next when I became my brother's guardian, at work, I was able to inquire about healthcare benefits. So we were able to extend my healthcare insurance to also provide him coverage. If you find yourself in the situation, you are able to have a guardianship event qualify as a life change. So even if it's outside of open enrollment, you can still provide care. Before my brother, who became my dependent legally, I was also taking care of my younger sibling who had come to live with me like right as I started working, and was able to say, hey, I'm the one providing care. Yes, she's an adult, but really like I'm the one caring for her. And so the work policy actually also covered her to be a dependent of mine, not via the court process, but at least with healthcare benefits, which is really helpful when you think about the American healthcare system. At school for my little brother, I became his legal guardian, which meant, again, at school, like if there was anything to happen, think PTA meetings, school counselor sessions, like I was the go-to. And having been the one who lived in the US before, unlike my mom, it also really helped me become a very strong advocate for him. He's about to graduate high school, so as you can probably see on my face, I'm a very proud pseudo parent. And in life, what that meant was becoming a soccer mom, and getting to go with him on college visits. But I think in the mundane pieces of it, it also really helped me connect, weirdly enough, if you will, with older coworkers who actually had kids they had birthed, were going through, having angsty teenagers at home. And I think oftentimes we talk about like not being able to relate, but in a weird turn of events, this experience allowed me, I guess, A, to mature quickly, but also B, have another point in common with a lot of my older coworkers where I actually did understand what it was like to have a kid at home and, some of those challenges, despite the very clear age gap between both of us. And, in the spirit of tax season, if you do find yourself, providing for more than half of someone's living expenses, there is a possibility for you to claim this person as a dependent or child on your taxes. I'm not a legal expert, so like please, do your due diligence, but just wanted to put that out there, given the time of the year that we're in. And lastly, it's come up already when Fernando and Francisco were speaking, but this quote really changed my relationship with my parents, with my mom and my siblings, as we think about what it means to help and to want to help. And these are the parting words that I would like to leave with you. And it's honestly something that has come up in family meetings, but it's really this idea of boundaries being the distance, at which I can love you and me simultaneously. It really helped me rethink how to approach caregiving. And, I don't know, at least for me, like I'm Catholic, and in the spirit of that, this like idea that you want to like love and give, I really believe it has to be from a positive place. It has to be from a place of love. And I think that when we're worn out, or if you don't feel appreciated, or if you feel like, people are only calling when they need help, it's really important to make sure you're having the right conversations around that, to never let it come from a place of resentment, or to never let it get to a place where you don't want to have a positive and loving relationship with your family anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a beautiful quote to end on as well. And maybe, like John mentioned, if folks have any questions or comments in the chat, we'd love for y'all to put that in there. Um, thank you, Lena, for that sweet comment. Awesome. I'm loving the love that's coming through to our speakers. And as we kind of close out the session today, if we can give just another round of applause, whether through Zoom hands, through love in the chat, for our speakers. Thank you so much, Amy, Jess, Fernando, Francisco, Leticia, all of our participants today. Y'all have been amazing, and just really, really grateful for you sharing your experiences very vulnerably, openly. I know I certainly learned a lot. And so really excited to take these lessons forward. And as always, as I'm sure folks are, if they have questions, they want to stick around, please feel free to. But if not, thank you everyone for being here, for learning about it, and we'll hope to see you soon.